Hey, where's your mom keep the vacuum cleaner?
You mean Jaws?
The base vacuum for the Jaws prop is called a Kirby Classic 1. Very hard to come by in Australia. So this is a process of how I went about modifying what I could get to make it look as close to the original prop as possible. Through my research, through lots of Kirby enthusiast websites, forums and a Facebook group, I actually got given some photos of the original prop being made, which were really quite helpful to know how the original prop drove. It looks like a radio controlled car was actually grafted underneath the original vacuum and then it was controlled that way. The way that I've done it is probably a little bit more advanced, but then again, mine's not a vacuum cleaner anymore, is it? I suppose in the movie magic sense, after the film was finished, they could have taken it off and just sent it back on its merry way to go and clean some offices somewhere. So Jaws is controlled by two small motors, one here, one here. Due to the weight of the Kirby vacuum in its stock form, the original suction motor and impeller and most of the control gear has been removed just for ease of maneuverability. I think if we left it in there it would have just been too heavy, but I'll cut now to showing you the inside and where the motors are. So the motors are mounted on this small piece of plywood. There's a motor here and one here. They're driven through these two leads into these two leads in the main body of the vacuum that actually go to two brushless speed controllers which are connected to the radio control receiver unit. But I'll pop this off. There are two screws hidden underneath the rubber bumper and then I'll be able to expose the drive system in its entirety. So if I've done this correctly now, this should be able to pop out. There we go. So there are two, I'll remove this again. These are 6-volt DC motors. There's a motor gearbox combination in one. It's an inline drive combination. There are some hub adapters on these small wheels. I had originally intended to use thicker wheels, but I couldn't find any that would actually fit within this dimension of the floor head. So the main idea of this was that the floor head could be detached from the main body. If there was anything that went wrong, a wire had broken off or something, or a tyre needed replacing, that could be done at an event if needed. So these just simply go through, they plug in off a couple of harnesses to these two wires there. So I'll put that back together. So some other parts of the electrical system that can be seen on the front is the LED wiring. So this is just, I think it's got a T10 fitting, like a side indicator light repeater, indicator LED bulb. This is a 3D printed housing. There is just a simple harness with the lamp holder on it, a 3D printed lens. That all goes through to where the traditional Kirby lens would have been. The traditional lens was the wrong shape for the vacuum that was used, so this has been fabricated and then I've tried to weather it so it will match. Also the belt lifter, this is what this was called on the original vacuum, actually had some pieces that would have stuck up. But again, because this is a different generation Kirby, I've 3D modeled something approximate to what it would have needed to be that will also match in with this to try and disguise any of the differences there. Right, around the back, the original power switch has actually been retained, and that's mainly due to this. This, I think they call it an IEC connector. Basically it has got these two pins bridged out, which would then make this switch functional. So when this is plugged in, the machine can be turned on. If that is taken away, doesn't matter what you do with that switch, it can't be turned on. But when I plug that in, that will turn on. So in the bag, again, there's a 3D printed tray for a battery to drop into, something like this, a small 2-cell LiPo, and a little pigtail that actually runs through the suction port of the vacuum, or what would have been the suction port, into the back housing here. In the housing, the speed controllers are plugged in and the radio receiver is actually zip tied to the inside here. So there's not much weight there, just was an easy place to put everything. Right, so we'll just quickly talk about the 3D printed parts on the Jaws build. Most of the 3D printed stuff is down here at the floor head. Basically, the Kirby that was originally used for Jaws had a different belt lifter to this one. It wasn't going to match, so I've tried to replicate the original belt lifter from images and try to scale it so it will fit this floor head as much as possible. It's not a perfect match, but it's the best I could do. It should also have some of this brown vinyl stuck in there. The problem is that to get brown vinyl to stick onto 3D printed parts can be a real, or any vinyl to get to stick on it is a real challenge. So I had to make do with what I had. The second part is the light, and again, it's making do with trying to get something to fit this. So this piece was adapted and printed in one section. The little holder for the LED under there was printed in the second, and the lens for the light was printed third. But if you look at the screen grabs back in the video, you'll see that the light actually looks really different. It's actually upwards, it's leaning forwards more, and you can see big gaps in the side. I tried to make this look as streamlined as possible, I suppose, doing one of those things I hate and trying to bring the designer's vision to life if they maybe had more time, more money, more resources. So this is the handle section for Jaws. It's modeled basically in 3 pieces. This section was all done in one. It took a lot of iterations of the design to get it down to being as streamlined as I could make it. Looking at the original prop, this front edge should actually be curved, but you can't really do that in Tinkercad while maintaining this shape. So scaling up from pictures, and I'm just realizing I'm saying a lot of times, I've tried to make this as best I could to fit over the piece of wood that's the handle extension. Originally, this thing started off probably, I don't know, 80, 60 mil thick, and I've slowly managed to get it down to just over 20. I've also tried to sort of fillet the edges to make it feel a bit smaller. These handles were off Thingiverse. They were just standard hand grips, and they were scaled down to fit over the PVC conduit that is part of this. The holes for these 3 lamp holders weren't modeled. They were just carefully measured and drilled after the fact, and these have been glued in. There are some holes that were intended to go through into the conduit and then into the piece of wood. They haven't been drilled and put in just yet because I'm probably going to take the piece of wood off to wrap it in this brown vinyl that you could see earlier. So far though, I think it's giving the impression that it needs to give. So I'm pretty happy with it. I know my son, who was the one who wanted this thing, is very happy with it so far. Yeah, that's the end of the 3D printed parts. The last part that I really need to talk about is the bag clip and the handle extension. This is a piece of pine that was very roughly cut down on a bandsaw, and then had a channel routed into the side so it would drop into this channel here. There is a bag hook, a cord hook that's meant to go through here. It's currently just got a wing nut and a bolt on it just to hold it in place. A small piece of chain from the hardware shop and a key ring. This should have a little carabiner on it, but I can't find one the right size yet, so I'm still waiting. The bag itself is the original Kirby bag that came on this vacuum. Part of the draw of this particular model vacuum is that it came with a red bag. Ideally, it should have a red cover with some elastic down here and the word Stanley written across it. There's no way that's within my skill set. I couldn't even sew the bag. This bag holder, bag clip, was originally this one, so it wouldn't have been a good fit at all. But the good thing about this one is that it had a hook that normally fits in the back of a Kirby handle. So that wasn't going to work. Took it off and made the best we could of it. So there it is. If you've made it this far, well done. I'd really love it if you could hit the subscribe button or at least a like, or if you didn't really like this video, the other button works just fine too. Any interaction helps the algorithm to either recommend my video to other people or let me know that I need to do a way better job. So thank you very much for taking the time, and I'll see you on the next one, hopefully.